Now, of course, during the recent election campaign on behalf of the Labor Party, I warned that the AAA credit rating was under real pressure. I said that no matter who was receiving the incoming Treasurer's briefing, it would contain the same information, that action was needed to deal with the AAA credit rating. Of course, during the election campaign, we also pointed out that the government's budget projections were based on fantasy, that the iron ore price was highly heroic, that the assumptions on wages and nominal growth were highly optimistic. And of course, Standard & Poor's have made the same observations today in their report. They say, and I quote, "We are more pessimistic about the central government's revenue outlook than the government was in the latest budget projections." That is exactly what the Labor Party was pointing out consistently during the recent election campaign. And of course, what we see today is Standard & Poor's calling out the Liberal National Government for 3 years of fiscal failure and passing a vote of no confidence in this government's ability to deal with the budget situation. Of course, the Liberal and National parties said that there was a budget emergency and that they would be the party to fix it. And of course, what we've seen is 3 years of policy missteps, false starts and missed opportunities, particularly since Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison took the reins. We've seen a lack of strategy and a lack of coherence in their economic approach. Moody's has previously warned, of course, one of the other ratings agencies, that revenue measures are necessary to protect the AAA credit rating. That's why the Labor Party went to this election with a difficult political issue that has been in the too hard basket for 30 years of dealing with negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions. That's why the Labor Party led that debate, because we know that that is what is necessary for the long-term budget health of the nation. And it is time now for the government to reflect on their absolute failure to deal with those issues. Of course, Standard & Poor's have also cast comments about the political instability as a result of the election. Now, I simply say the Prime Minister called a double dissolution election, introduced Senate voting reforms and then a double dissolution election, which increased the likelihood of that political instability. It's not just about the House of Representatives, but also about the Senate. Of course, the Prime Minister's personal strategy in this recent election campaign, calling the Parliament back, holding a 2-month election, having a budget leading into the election, were all the personal calls of Malcolm Turnbull, and his strategy has failed, underlying his lack of judgment. And his political judgment has been fatally wounded in the recent weeks. Now, of course, there's a process underway with the counting of the final seats. We do not know the final results. Malcolm Turnbull's the incumbent Prime Minister. He has the first opportunity to form government, and it's up to him what he advises the Governor-General in any circumstances. The Labor Party, whether in government or opposition, has always acted in the national interest. We've always, where we can, stood up for our values and opposed what we need to oppose, but work with the government of the day on what we can work with. And that will continue. And we'll continue to work with other parties across the Parliament, regardless of the election result. But we'll also continue to lead the policy debate. We'll also continue to do what the government and the Treasurer refuses to do, and point out that difficult decisions are necessary on things like negative gearing and capital gains tax. And one final point. The Treasurer just a few moments ago said, and I quote, "It would not be responsible to take policy decisions which increase the budget deficit." That is after he and the Prime Minister have spent the last 2 months arguing for just that, a $50 billion corporate tax cut, which increases cumulative budget deficits by definition over the next decade by $50 billion. Well, now is not the time for those sorts of tax cuts. Now is not the time for a government which refuses to make the difficult decisions necessary for the budget, but is prepared to hand over billions of dollars to big business at a time when the AAA credit rating is now more than ever clearly under threat. Now, the implications of losing the AAA credit rating would be significant. I've talked about them before. Increase in government borrowing costs, increase in costs to the banks who would be at risk of flow-on downgrades from the big banks' AA ratings, and of course a blow to consumer confidence and investor confidence. Now, the opposition will always keep our commentary responsible and mature. We'll always point out the implications of these things in a sober and well-constructed way. But we will also point out that the government of the day, having been responsible for the last 3 years, must take responsibility for this action today by Standard & Poor's. The Labor Party earned 3 AAA credit ratings during the global financial crisis. It would be a blow to the nation to lose it, and it's up to the government to step up to the plate to take this sober warning today from Standard & Poor's, together with the previous warnings from Moody's about the need for revenue measures, and to listen. Happy to take some questions.
Standard & Poor's has made a point of saying that our banks are one of our strengths. Given those economic conditions and the warning over Australia at the moment, is it really the best time to have a Royal Commission into the banking system?
I think those two issues are completely unrelated. With respect, the ratings agencies have expressed no concerns about a Royal Commission into the banks. We want our banks to be profitable, to be strong and to be successful, but we want them working in the best interest of all Australians. And I don't need to run you through all the reasons we outlined during the election campaign as to why that wasn't the case, that many Australians have suffered losses in unacceptable circumstances, and that a well-constructed, proper Royal Commission would be an appropriate thing to do. And I think you've seen that welcomed across the community.
Not undermining in
I don't think, look, if the ratings agencies were concerned about that, they would have said so, and they're not.
Why do you continue to oppose the coalition savings measures, given S&P have said that remedial action is required?
Well, here we are again. We have supported some savings measures from the government over the last 3 years, and we announced some of our own savings measures during the election campaign, as well as further updating our position on some of the proposals that the government had. But what we won't do is sell out on those people who rely on us to protect them in the Parliament. What we won't do is say it's okay for, in Australia in 2016, for unemployed people to be forced to wait a month to get New Start, which is not a generous allowance but enables them to put food on the table when they become unemployed. We won't do that. We don't think that Australia should be the only country in the world where people retire or don't access the pension until the age of 70. We won't do that. We won't say that Australian pensioners from countries other than Australia in their background should find it harder to travel to their homeland and keep their pension. We won't do that. So we've fought those issues and we'll continue to fight them. And again, this is the point. Scott Morrison's budget is based on those measures passing, as well as highly heroic assumptions on things like the iron ore price. They will not pass, and it's about time he was honest about it to the Parliament and to the people.
Given the concerns of S&P about the outlook for the budget, do you think that a Labor government should look at further revenue measures to bolster that?
Well, I think, with respect, we've led the debate. We've shown considerable courage in dealing with these matters. Now, of course, regardless of, we'll wait and see the election result, but should we continue in opposition, we'll continue to lead the debate. We'll continue to point out the need for tough measures, and over the course of a 3-year term, if it lasts that long, you update your policies and make further announcements.
The support for the Medicare during the election campaign is something you've obviously taken on board, but Medicare obviously costs a lot of money, and that's going to grow with demographics. I mean, don't we need further revenue measures to actually pay for Medicare?
Yeah, and we have, and as I said, whether it was, we led the debate on negative gearing, capital gains tax reform, high income super. We were talking about this 18 months ago, announcing detailed policies. The now Treasurer railed against it. Tobacco, and we have led that. Now, if you're asking, will we support an increase in the GST? The answer is no, for all the reasons we've previously outlined.
And you're currently proposing a slower return to surplus than the coalition over the next 3 years. How can you continue to advocate for this?
Well, again, over the course of this term, should we be in opposition, we'll update all our figures and, or update all our policies. But clearly, we had returned to budget surplus the same year as the government, and then growing to significantly bigger surpluses over the medium term, and measures which make a significant contribution to the budget in a growing way. So negative gearing and capital gains tax reform, for example, returning $8 billion a year to the budget by the end of the decade, at a time when the government's corporate tax cuts will cost $14 billion a year. Okay?
How will you reply, and how will you regard a minority coalition government?
How will we regard? Well, it'll be the government of the day, and we will respond to their policies based on our values, principles, and what they said during an election campaign. We'll work with the government where appropriate in the national interest, and we'll work with all parties to see policies implemented, our policies where possible. But we will hold the government to account we will be, just as we've been, a strong and unified opposition over the last 3 years. That would continue. Thanks very much. We'll leave it there. Cheers.
All right, well, there you go. Two perspectives on the same problem, that being the outlook for the budget and Australia's AAA credit rating. The ratings agency S&P has started all this with a new statement that changes the outlook for Australia from stable to negative.